Hi, it's very great to be here. Well, I'm a painter, and today I'll be showing you some examples of my works, and I'll be discussing about the methodology that is behind them, which will hopefully lead us to the topic of hyperreality. Well, I love human faces, and I'm basically a portrait artist, and I do paint realistic portraits. And this is one of my earlier portraits. It's the portrait of, do you know who this is? It's Gandalf, or Magneto. Sir Ian McKellen, personally, he is my favorite actor. And you can see how much I wanted to capture all the detail on his face as realistically as possible. And this is the portrait of my friend, although he looks like one of those characters from Game of Thrones. He is my friend. And this is also the face of my friend, who still complains about those pimples on his face. Couldn't you just leave out? He told me, and I said, no. Live with it, that's what makes you who you are. Pimples. And this is one of my personal favorites, is the portrait of my own good old grandfather. So as you can see in my earlier works, I've been focusing on painting the portraits of real people, those people around me, like my family, my friends, sometimes my favorite movie star. And then I wanted to try something different. I wanted to try something that is not common in the work of portraiture. I wanted to take a step further. Well, I'm a man of old taste. I love classics, and I love classical art. And when I was traveling the European cities, I encountered countless pieces of old sculptures, those statues, beautiful statues created in ancient Greece, or during the Roman Empire, or the Italian Renaissance. And I told myself, well, that's it. I'm going to give life to those figures that are depicted in those statuary by imagining them how they would look like if they were real, and producing the hyperrealistic, the photorealistic images of them. Well, this old man is Homer, the legendary Greek poet, and this is a marble bust you can go see in the Louvre. And after seeing and observing this piece of marble, this is how I painted Homer, all in living flesh and blood. Thank you. Thank you. Well, this job was not easy because compared to my earliest portraits, well, when I was painting the portraits of real people, it was relatively easy and simple because I had certain precise models, those visual references that I could just look, observe, and then copy onto the canvas. But here, I had to rely heavily on my imagination. But then when it comes to present something photorealistic, you need something way more than just your imagination. You need visual aids. So I went out into the streets, and I began looking for a person, a real person, a model who happens to bear a similar facial feature with Homer. And I found this man, Mr. Michael Finneran, and since we've become friends, I should call him Finn. I spotted him in the streets of Itaewon. It's a little street, it's a big street in the city I came from. And I asked him to be my model. I explained to him in detail what I need him for. And then he kindly consented to be my model. So I called him to my studio, and I studied his face. I took many, many pictures of it. And then I combined these two images. That face of Homer that is depicted in the old statuary and the real face of Mr. Finneran. And if you see the result, those general features of Homer's face, such as the basic position and the shapes of the eyes, the nose, the lips, the way he wears his hairband, and his outfits, were all strictly based on the actual bust that was created during the Greek period. But then all other elements that makes Homer lifelike and human, such as the imperfections on the skin, the untidiness in the hair, the pores and the pores and the moles, all those human elements were all harvested from Mr. Finneran's face. And this is the second example. This handsome young man is called Giluiano de Medici, and he's best known to us as this great statue created by the great Michelangelo Buonarroti. And for this one, finding a model was way easier because one of my closest friends, Charles Anderson, happened to bear a striking resemblance with the face of Giuliano. So again, those two images were combined, and magic happens. The real lifelike image of Giuliano is created on canvas. Let's move on to the next example. This poor-looking old man is Seneca, the Roman philosopher. And for this one, I tried something a little bit different. Instead of finding one definitive model, I tried to collect multiple images of those old actors who I thought bears the similar facial feature with Seneca, such as Mr. John Hurt, Christopher Lee, and then I tried many different things with the fabric that I bought in the market to present him with the proper outfit. And again, all these visual elements were combined, and the lifelike image of this old Roman philosopher was again created. Thank you. And this is the painting that I'm working on these days. And this lady is Costanza Bonarelli, which is based on the bust created by the 17th century sculptor Gian Lorenzo Bernini. And for this one, I asked my friend and colleague, Miss Lauren Ashmorgan. And again, the lifelike image of this lady who lived about 400 years ago is on its way now. Well, well, it's good to be applauded. Thank you. Well, while I was developing this new type of works, I was heavily influenced by a scholar named Johann Winkelmann. This is a German. He was a great art historian and archaeologist from 18th century. And he, just like me, was also a worshiper of classical art. He loved the Greeks, and he had this firm belief that the works of the ancient Greeks is the most perfect of all arts and can never be surpassed. And in 1755, he wrote a book, a very influential book, which sparked the movement of neoclassicism against the Baroque. The book is called Reflections on the Imitation of Greek Works in Painting and Sculpture. And in that book, he strongly urged that in order to achieve something as perfect and beautiful as Greek arts, an artist must study and imitate the works of the ancient Greeks rather than studying nature, because in the works of the ancient Greeks, everything is made perfect and beautiful. Whereas in nature, well, nature is beautiful, but not always perfect. Nature does have her flaws. Think about the human body, those beautiful, well-proportioned human body that is always idealized in the Greek sculptures. And what about the real human body? Is every human body beautiful? Well, some of them are, but most of them are definitely not. When you go to a beach, it does not take too long to realize that most of the human body, especially when they're naked, are rather revolting to look at. Sad, but true. So Winkelmann's logic was simple, and any aspiring artist, if he wished to achieve greatness and perfection, must imitate the works of the Greeks. And that's exactly what the great classicists like Ingres, David, and Bouguereau did for their work. And I, as a fellow worshipper of the classical art, took the doctrine as well, but with a little change in it. I executed the doctrine in the opposite way. What I did was de-idealization. I took the already idealized objects, such as those statues or the bust, and then I made them into human by adding all those human elements, such as imperfections on the skin, all the signs of aging human body. And the beauty which was combined and ennobled and idealized into the world of the ideal is once again brought down, scattered, and being de-idealized into the world of the real. But here, one aspect, one simple fact should be noted. Although that image of Seneca, for example, on the canvas, pretends to be the real, actual image of Seneca, we all know that painting is a forgery. It's an imitation, it's a representation, it's a combination of the bust of Seneca and some of those random images that I've collected. I showed you how I did that. After all, it's a false image which pretends to be real and original. So in a more sophisticated term, it is a simulacrum. And here we have our final issue of the talk, simulacrum. Well, simulacrum is a very interesting concept. Simulacrum, or simulacra in plural, refers to an image or an effigy that represents or imitates something or someone. So it has been largely regarded as distorted, inferior, and therefore not perfect copy of the original. Think about the map. This is the map of Seoul, the city where I come from. This map is a poor representation of the actual area of Seoul. We all know that. There is a great gap between the actual area of Seoul and this poor representation of Seoul. Though it may show you the basic locations of the buildings, roads, mountains, and the rivers, still, it's not perfect. And this is the typical simulacra that we used to have in the traditional society. But now, in the modern society, in the world we live in, thanks to the great advancement in technology, simulacra has reached a whole different level. Now we have this. Think about Google Earth. Google Earth is basically a map. And then it is a map that covers the entire region almost perfectly. And it does something else. It takes you to places that are almost impossible to reach, such as the tops of the Himalayas, to the space, to the oceans, even to North Korea. I've been there by Google Earth. You can compute distances. You can view a certain area in full 3D. You can even take high-resolution pictures. You can even track the space shuttle. It gives you a whole different experience. And this is what simulacra has become in this modern society. So according to this man, French sociologist Jean Baudrillard, simulacra now has its own substantial quality. It now equals and sometimes even exceeds the original, because the modern society is so overrun by this new sophisticated simulacra. So an individual in such a society, we all often find ourselves falling into a state in which we are unable to distinguish what is reality and what is the imitation of reality. We get confused. And in order to explain such a condition, Baudrillard himself coined the term hyperreality. Now we have hyperreality. Well, if you look at the painting, hyperreality is about the confusion in which the individual finds himself unable to tell the difference what is real and what is fiction. Well, it may sound like some kind of science fiction movie, but in fact, we are experiencing it in our everyday lives. Think about Facebook. I think Facebook is the most powerful hyperreality in today's world. It is basically the empire of simulacra. Facebook is basically comprised of all those reproduced, represented images of its users. Think about how you use it, and think about how your own lives is being consumed by it. Well, that moment when you post pictures and do status updates, and then you feel you've just become a king of the world when you receive hundreds of likes for your selfie, which is usually taken in front of the mirror inside the toilet. Well, have you ever seen, well, you've all seen a man or a woman taking a selfie, haven't you? Actually, during the break time, I saw many of you taking selfies on this stage. And it's goofy, you know? It's one of the most stupid-looking behavior in real life. Let's face it, it's one of the most stupid-looking behavior in real life. But we would still do it. I do that too. I'm with you. We will still do it for the sake of this virtual, hyperreal world inside the Facebook. And that's the typical symptom of hyperreality. So let's get back to the paintings. Well, I am regarded as hyperrealistic artist, and people call me that I belong to the school of hyperrealism, and my works hyperrealistic because, simple logic, my works are very realistic. They are like photographs, and for the same reason they attack me. What's the point? They tell me, what's the point in creating something photorealistic or hyperrealistic when you can always take a picture with a camera? And here we can see how mistaken people are when it comes to the term hyperrealism. Well, hyperrealism is an artistic reflection on hyperreality. And hyperreality, just we have seen, is not about the process of creating something realistic. Hyperreality is an experience of being unable to tell the difference between what is original and what is the simulation of original. So hyperrealist's purpose is never about showing off our skills. It's not about how good I am in draughtsmanship or in the usage of colors. It's about making an artistic statement on a certain aspect of today's world, the phenomenon of hyperreality. So think about when you're seeing a piece of hyperrealistic painting. Well, many of the hyperrealistic paintings, when they are well executed, they look so realistic, they look almost even more realistic than photographs. So at first glance, you get confused whether you're looking at a photograph or a painting. And that very moment of confusion, those confusion between the original and the imitation of the original, is the moment when you're experiencing the hyperreality. So, thank you. If you look at my works, those images of Homer, Giluiano and Seneca, they are all undoubtedly the simulacra. They are the forged and crafted images. They are the reproduced and imitated images of those old classical sculptures. We all know that because I told you. I told you all about my secret. And then these images, they pretend as if they came before the sculptures. They pretend as if they were the original images that those sculptures were based on. For example, this painting of Giluiano, we all know that this is a crafted image, it's a representation, an imitation, but this image itself pretends as if this is the actual face of Giluiano that Michelangelo might have looked upon before he created his sculpture. And that very pretense itself is what visually symbolizes this hyperreality. So whenever you are seeing a work of hyperrealism, in fact, an artist is telling you behind that canvas that such hierarchy, which once existed between the original and the imitation of the original, does not exist anymore. By making you to realize that you've just been tricked into confusion between the reality and the simulation of reality, the artist is trying to give you the message that that is the kind of world we live in. It is the world where the reality and the fiction is so seamlessly blended and commingled that we no longer consciously tell them apart. It is the hyperreal world. After all, hyperrealistic artists like me and my fellow artists, they are no mere technicians. Like all other hardworking contemporary artists in the world, they are rather the visual poets or the visual philosophers who arbitrate between what is real and what is illusory. They are, after all, to quote William Shakespeare, the abstract and brief chronicles of the time. Thank you. Thank you very much.